She's only here because the court said she had to be. We all know she can barely take care of herself, let alone 2 kids. The words cut through the hum of polite conversation like a blade. People froze mid-laugh, mid-sip, mid-sentence. It was the school's annual fall recital. A warm October evening, cafeteria lights buzzing faintly overhead, folding chairs lined up in careful rows, and children's crayon-colored artwork taped proudly to the walls. And then there was me, standing in the back, still catching my breath after rushing from my shift at the diner. Hair pulled back with a pen because I forgot my clip. A stain on my sleeve from spilled soup. I was late, again, but I made it. I always made it. My ex-husband stood near the front with his wife. Yes, the same woman who used to be our babysitter. She wore heels too high for a school event, holding her phone like it might bite her if she lowered it for more than 5 seconds. He wore that smug look I remembered too well, the one he saved for courtrooms, co-workers, and now apparently school events. He didn't whisper. He didn't try to hide it. He wanted me to hear, and I did. So did everyone else. The mother sitting next to him looked away, suddenly fascinated by the program in her lap. A teacher offered a tight smile in my direction, then busied herself with tape that didn't need fixing. Someone chuckled. I couldn't tell who. I stood still. I didn't blink. I couldn't afford to. My daughter, Haley, was on stage, fidgeting with her sleeves. Ethan stood beside her, hands tucked behind his back, a little wrinkle forming between his brows. They both saw me walk in, and they both saw what came next. My ex glanced over his shoulder and smirked. I guess even waitresses get visiting rights these days, he muttered. No one stopped him. No one defended me. And I said nothing. Not because I agreed, not because I was ashamed, but because if I opened my mouth, the tears sitting just behind my eyes would come rushing out, and my children were watching. So I stood straighter. I folded my arms. I nodded toward Haley and Ethan, who were about to sing something about pumpkins and falling leaves. That night, they were the only reason I didn't crumble. Still, my stomach twisted as I watched the other parents. Dads with clean collars and firm handshakes, moms with pumpkin lattes and French manicures. No one saw me as one of them. Not anymore. And then, Ethan looked at me. Just before the music started, he tilted his head, his eyes locked onto mine with a quiet kind of knowing. He mouthed 3 words. I almost missed them. You still came. That's all he said. That's all he needed to say. It was like a thread pulling me back into place. A small, silent reminder that I mattered more than he could ever understand. Later that evening, as everyone clapped and the lights flickered brighter, my ex brushed past me in the hallway. He paused, leaned in and whispered, "Enjoy it while you can. Once the judge sees the papers, they're mine." That's when Ethan appeared beside me, holding his drawing of a family, me, him, Haley, and no one else. He looked up at me with a voice soft but steady and said, if he knew what I wrote, he'd stop smiling. And just like that, there was a shift, not in the room, not in him, but in me. Something that had been curled tight inside for years started to unfold. He didn't know what was coming, but my son did. The bus windows fogged up just as we pulled away from the school. I sat with Ethan's drawing in my lap, the paper already smudged from how tightly I'd been holding it. Inside my coat pocket, I felt something folded, something he must have slipped in without me noticing. A letter. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I just stared at the cartoon versions of us. Him, Haley, and me. All smiling. The background was a picnic. No house. No dad. Just a tree, a sun, and 3 little hearts floating above our heads. It pulled me backward. Years back. There was a time we were a real family, when Ethan was still crawling around in dinosaur pajamas, and Haley was barely more than a heartbeat inside me. My husband, well, back then, he still laughed with his eyes. He used to wrap my fingers in his on the walk home from the grocery store, humming songs he'd make up on the spot. I remember one afternoon, Ethan had drawn a crooked crayon house and stuck it to the fridge. "That's us!" he'd shouted. My ex looked at it, smiled, and said, "That's not bad, kid. You got your mom's spark." I remember how my heart fluttered. That spark, he said, like it meant something. But sparks fade, especially when someone else starts fanning their own flame. It didn't happen all at once. First it was the late meetings, then the missed dinners, then the woman who came by to help out when I was pregnant with Haley. Her name was Michelle. She wore perfume that clung to the hallway long after she left and said things like, "You're so lucky to have a man like him." I used to think that too. By the time Haley was born, he was a shadow in our home. Present, but absent. His body was at the dinner table, but his heart was somewhere else. I could feel it, like trying to hug a ghost. One night I confronted him. I didn't even raise my voice. I just asked. He didn't deny it, just blinked slowly and said, "You're not easy to be around anymore." That was the beginning of the end. The divorce came fast, clean, on paper. But emotionally, it was a slow bleed. He had the better lawyer, the higher income, a support system that pretended I was crazy before I ever opened my mouth. His family iced me out immediately. "She's unstable. She always did want pity. I never liked her energy." Funny, I used to make Thanksgiving for all of them. The court gave him primary custody. I got weekends, alternate holidays. I was labeled safe but limited. I cried in the bathroom that night so my kids wouldn't hear. And yet, I never missed a weekend. Even when I had to walk in the snow because the car broke down, even when I worked double shifts and only got 3 hours of sleep, I showed up, with cheap board games and hand-packed lunches and a smile I forced so hard it hurt my cheeks. But the worst pain? It was watching them slowly absorb what was being said around them. "Oh, you still live in that little place?" Michelle once asked in front of Ethan. Poor thing. Another time, I dropped off the kids and overheard his mother say, "Why don't we just file for full custody already? She's practically irrelevant." They said it like I wasn't there, and maybe to them, I wasn't. But Ethan? He always saw me. Even when he was too little to understand, he'd notice. The tear I quickly wiped away, the sigh I swallowed, the extra cookie I pretended I didn't need, just so he could have one more. He never said much, but he saw. I remember one weekend. It was raining hard, and he asked, "Why do you still come if it's so hard?" I laughed and said, "Because this is my favorite part of the week." He didn't smile. He just nodded, quietly, like he was filing that answer away somewhere deep. The years moved on. So did my ex. He married Michelle. They bought a house with a backyard and a golden retriever named Max. The perfect holiday cards started showing up, the matching outfits, the lake trips. Everything looked picture perfect. I wasn't in the picture, literally. Haley once brought me her school yearbook and pointed out a family photo taken at a science fair. "You weren't there that day," she said. I was. I had just been asked to stay off to the side to avoid confusing the teacher. I kept showing up. Until showing up wasn't enough. A month ago, I got a letter in the mail, official court summons. My ex was filing for full custody. He said I was unstable, that I couldn't offer a proper home, that Ethan and Haley needed structure and consistency. What he meant was, they needed distance from me. The hearing was in 3 weeks, and even though I knew it would hurt, I planned to go, not to fight, not to win, but to show my children one more time. I was still here, even when it was hard, even when I wasn't wanted. I folded Ethan's picture and finally opened the letter tucked into my pocket. It was his handwriting, and by the time I reached the second sentence, I had to stop reading. The tears had started again, but this time they didn't burn. Because in that letter, my son had already chosen, and I wasn't invisible anymore. The morning of the custody hearing, I sat in the parking lot 15 minutes too early, hands cold on the steering wheel, even though the sun was out. I'd worn the best thing I owned, a navy blouse I kept folded in plastic, a pair of low black heels, and makeup done with shaky hands in my bathroom mirror. In my purse, I carried only 3 things: a letter from Ethan, a folder of employment records, and a court-issued paper that still read alternate residential parent under my name. I had no illusions. My ex had the expensive lawyer, the judge's golf club friend, and a list of concerning anecdotes compiled by his wife, Little things blown up like fireworks. The time Haley forgot her math homework at my place. The peanut allergy mix-up that wasn't even an allergy, just a dislike. They weren't just trying to win custody, they were trying to rewrite the narrative completely, erase me from their perfect home picture like I'd never mattered at all. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Quiet, intimate, painfully lit. Michelle sat in the front row like she owned the place, her blazer too tight for comfort, legs crossed like she was auditioning for a pageant, not a legal battle. She glanced at me once, smirked, and went right back to scrolling on her phone. My ex didn't acknowledge me at all. Just shook hands with his lawyer, gave Ethan a pat on the shoulder like he was a trophy, and nodded to the bailiff like they were on a first-name basis. When I took my seat, there was no warm smile from anyone, no comfort. The woman next to me even shifted away a little. I looked down. I had spilled coffee on my skirt and hadn't noticed. Of course I had. The judge entered. The room stood, and like that, we began. It started civil. Legal jargon, objections, paperwork being passed forward, and then my ex spoke. He stood there, hands folded behind his back like he was giving a presentation. "Your Honor," he began, voice honeyed, "this isn't about punishing my ex-wife. It's about providing stability for our children." I didn't look at him. I looked at Ethan. He wasn't watching his dad. He was watching me. "I have nothing against her as a person," my ex continued. "But her lifestyle choices, her work hours, and her emotional instability have become increasingly concerning. We've received reports from teachers and neighbors noting inconsistencies, missed pickups, a general lack of structure, a murmur from the row behind me. I felt my throat tighten. And frankly," he added, pausing for effect, "I believe the children are being emotionally manipulated. Especially my son, who's been unusually withdrawn. We fear it's due to pressure placed on him during visits." Pressure, that was the word they chose. Not love, not safety. Pressure. My lawyer leaned in. "Don't react," she whispered, as if I could. I was frozen in my seat. Then Michelle stood. She wasn't called, but she stood anyway. "If I may, Your Honor," she chirped, "I've witnessed firsthand how exhausted the children are after weekends with her. I'm not saying she's unfit, but the difference in behavior is noticeable. They seem heavier. Heavier. Because I asked about their day? Because I sat up with Haley when she had nightmares? Because Ethan once cried at my table and told me he missed when we all lived together?" The judge allowed her to continue, briefly. She did, with flair. "With all due respect," Michelle said, "she's a waitress. I don't say that with judgment, I say that with concern. It's a demanding job. Long hours. She has no flexibility. And when you're raising children, that matters." People nodded. I wanted to scream. Instead, I folded my hands and stared straight ahead. Then came the worst part. They pulled out a slideshow, a literal slideshow. Photos of Ethan and Haley at family events, all taken at their house. Birthday parties, school recitals, a camping trip I wasn't told about. Each image labeled by date with captions like consistent environment and family stability. I was in none of them, but I remembered the weekends before and after each of those photos. The snotty noses I wiped, the macaroni dinners we made, the handmade cards that never made it to their dad's fridge. The judge looked at me. "Ms. Carter, do you have a statement?" I stood. My knees wobbled. And then, before I could even open my mouth, my ex leaned toward the microphone and said, "Your Honor, if I may, I believe the children are here today. Would it be all right if Ethan shared his feelings, just briefly?" The judge nodded. I turned toward my son, seated in the gallery. He stood slowly, and for the first time that morning, the room truly fell silent. Ethan stepped forward, holding something in his hand. His voice was quiet. I wrote something," he said. Michelle shifted in her seat. My ex straightened his tie. I couldn't breathe. Ethan glanced at me, just for a second, then looked straight ahead and said, "But maybe I should wait until later." The judge blinked. "It's up to you, young man." Ethan nodded, then stepped back. That moment, it lingered, like the inhale before a storm. The rest of the hearing continued. Legal terms, motions, temporary agreements. But all I could feel was the weight in that pause. That breath Ethan took before choosing silence. For now. Something was coming. I didn't know what. But in that moment, I finally knew this. He wasn't afraid. And neither was I. Ars. It started with the silence. Not the kind that stretches awkwardly. No. This one was sharp, slicing through the buzzing voices like a piano string pulled taut. Ethan was gone. 1 minute he had been sitting beside me, hands clenched in his lap, jaw tight with that same quiet pain I had seen in his drawings lately. The next, his chair was empty. I blinked, confused, my heart skipping as I scanned the room. We were in the school auditorium, still warm with overhead lights and the scent of cafeteria wax. The family recognition night banner flapped faintly behind the stage. My ex-husband was near the front again, back straight like he belonged on a pedestal. And of course, she was glued to his side, flipping her hair, adjusting her necklace. They'd both spoken just minutes ago, loud enough for everyone to hear. She still thinks showing up will make a difference, he muttered. Must have forgotten the custody hearings next week. I had frozen, just like before. Not out of fear this time, but because I had nothing left to lose. Only one person in that room saw me for who I was. And now, he was gone. Until the microphone squealed. Then I heard it, the scrape of sneakers, the soft thump of a paper folder, and my son's voice. It wasn't loud, but the auditorium hushed like someone had hit mute. "Before you all clap for families tonight," Ethan said, standing dead center under the spotlight, "I need to say something." He was 12, barely taller than the podium, hair too long over his ears, his shirt half untucked from the waistband of his khakis. But in that moment, he didn't just look older. He looked ancient, like he had carried too many truths too quietly. My ex stood up halfway, confused. "Ethan, what are you doing?" But Ethan didn't even glance at him. He looked at me, just me, and then turned to face the crowd. "There's been talk," he said slowly, "about who deserves to be called our real parent, who should get custody, who's fit." You could have heard a pencil drop. He held up a sheet of paper. It fluttered slightly from the AC vent above. "This is a letter I wrote 2 months ago, for school. We were supposed to describe someone who shaped our life. I didn't tell Mom about it because I didn't think she'd believe me." He unfolded it, hands trembling slightly. Then he began reading. "My mom doesn't have a big job or fancy clothes. She doesn't get to pick us up every day or volunteer at events. But she taught me how to be kind when people are cruel. She taught me how to be brave when you feel alone. And even when she cried, she never let go of me." He paused, cleared his throat. "My mom is not just the other parent. She's the reason I still believe people can change things with love. She shows up, even when no one claps for her." The crowd was still frozen, but not cold anymore. My ex took a step forward, trying to save face. "Ethan, that's not what this night is for." But Ethan turned to him, and this time his voice was clear. "You told me Mom was weak, that the court would laugh at her." He held up a folder. "Well, this is the schedule Mom wrote down. Every single weekend visit, every call you skipped, every concert she showed up to, every time she said, 'It's okay, baby. I'm still here.'" The silence cracked like a sheet of ice underfoot. He stepped closer to the front row. "She saved every message, every missed call, every letter I wrote her that got sent back unopened because you changed the mailbox code." A teacher gasped. Another parent whispered, "Wait, what?" Ethan handed the folder to the principal. "You wanted to know who deserves custody? Maybe start here." My ex looked like someone had yanked the ground from beneath him, but Ethan wasn't done. He turned to the crowd one last time, his voice steady now, like he'd rehearsed it in his mind 100 nights before sleep. "I'm not asking you to clap for my mom. She doesn't need it. I just want everyone to stop pretending she's invisible. She's the reason I get up in the morning without feeling like I'm not enough. And then, just like that, he walked off the stage, came straight to me. The whole room was still. My hands were pressed tight against my chest, but they were shaking anyway. He reached for them. "I know you didn't need saving," he whispered. "But I did." I didn't cry. Not yet. Not until he leaned into my shoulder and stayed there. We stood together in the aisle. No spotlight, no applause. Just truth. Finally loud enough for everyone to hear. And as the lights dimmed again, as my ex sat frozen with his jaw clenched and eyes wide, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding for years, because he didn't win, not that night, not ever again. After the letter, everything slowed down, and then cracked open like glass under pressure. The courtroom had been stunned into silence, but the aftermath didn't stop at the courthouse steps. My ex, once the proud, smirking man who thought charm and a crisp suit could outshine years of absence, was no longer untouchable. He'd underestimated the one thing he couldn't outmaneuver, our son's truth. It started subtly. First, the school counselor requested a meeting, not with me, but with him. Then Haley's teacher, the one who'd always leaned into his side of the story, politely excused herself from their usual hallway chats. The looks began to change, not dramatic, not loud, just colder, shorter. Whispers started, the kind that crawl behind your back and bite when you turn. Apparently, the letter had done more than sway a judge. It had reached eyes beyond the courtroom, teachers, other parents, a few colleagues he used to brag to about his full custody plan. And the final ruling? Joint custody remained in place, but now, with strict visitation terms, supervised, weekends only, counseling required, and the judge's final words were clear. Any attempt to disparage the children's mother, directly or indirectly, will result in a review of all custody arrangements. That smug expression he wore? Gone, replaced with something quieter, angrier. He didn't say a word to me when the hearing ended. Just brushed past, jaw clenched, his new wife trailing behind in silence, heels clicking like a clock winding down. They never expected Ethan to do what he did. No one did. And yet, there was still more to come. The principal of Haley's school, who once seemed cozy with my ex and his wife, reached out with an apology. A real one. Apparently, Ethan had included details in that letter about how Dad's house feels quiet but not peaceful, about how we can't really laugh there, about how I smell like soup sometimes but always hug like home. It shook people. Even those who never liked me much now looked uneasy in my presence. One of the mothers who once turned her nose up at my uniform and my messy hair came over after dismissal and said, "I didn't know. I should have known." I nodded, but didn't say anything. Some things don't need answers, just space. Then came the emails. 3 co-workers of my ex, yes, 3, sent me messages. One of them included screenshots. Apparently, my ex had made jokes about winning the kids like a custody prize. He'd even forwarded a meme calling working moms weekend moms at best. The screenshots found their way to HR, and as far as I know, he's no longer part of that company's diversity council, or any council really. Word spreads fast when it comes from a child's handwriting. At home, things shifted too. Haley started sleeping through the night again. She asked me to pack her lunch with those bent carrots, because Dad never peels them right. Ethan didn't ask about court anymore. He just came into the kitchen one morning and said, "I'm glad we're here." That was it. That was everything. And those who once stood on the sidelines, neighbors, old friends, even my own brother, who once said, "Maybe he's just the more stable parent," began to creep back in. They called, messaged. We didn't know. We were misled. "You've always been strong." But apologies without presence. Too late. The people who mattered had already stayed. The ones who didn't. Well, life moved on without them just fine. As for his wife, the former babysitter who once called me the dramatic ex, she stopped showing up to school entirely. I heard they argued, a lot. Something about how this wasn't the life she signed up for. I suppose being seen as the villain in a story you helped write isn't as glamorous when the spotlight burns. Meanwhile, I was still working nights at the diner, still tying my hair up with a pen. But somehow, everything felt lighter. Ethan brought home a sketch for art class, 3 stick figures holding hands. He labeled them me, Haley, him, no one else. That picture sits framed by the front door now, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. And even though the battles had left scars, they'd also left something else. Proof. Proof that love, quiet, steady, unshakable love, outlasts manipulation. Proof that dignity doesn't need a mic to be loud. And proof that sometimes justice doesn't come with handcuffs or headlines, just the simple, unmistakable sound of truth settling in. I never fought for revenge, just to be seen. And now, when I pick my kids up, they run into my arms, not because they have to, but because they want to. That, to me, is justice. And somehow, that's more than enough. These days, life is quiet, but not the kind of silence that used to echo after slammed doors or cold courtrooms. It's the kind of quiet you earn, the kind that fills a room with peace instead of walking on eggshells, the kind that lets you breathe, not brace. Most mornings, the kids are already up when I come out with my coffee. Haley likes to read on the couch, her legs tangled in a blanket too big for her. Ethan hums while he packs his own lunch. He's always been the kind who folds the napkin before tucking it into the bag. We don't talk about the custody case much anymore, not because we've forgotten, but because we don't need to reopen what we've already healed. Some scars are quiet too. I still catch people staring sometimes, at the grocery store, school pickup, even the local diner where I work weekends. Some of those stares come with soft nods now. Others come with the kind of shame they don't know how to speak aloud, but I'm not waiting for apologies, not anymore. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't something you give to make others feel better. It's something you give yourself so you can stop carrying their weight, and I gave that weight back a long time ago. Ethan's letter is still in the drawer next to my bed, folded neatly, a little worn at the corners from the times I've held it late at night. He doesn't know I still read it. He doesn't need to. Because that letter wasn't just for the judge. It was for me. It told me that even when I was exhausted, even when I thought I was failing, even when I had nothing but coupons and prayers in my purse, I was still enough. That's what I want to leave you with tonight. You, the woman watching this video in her car before picking up her kids. You, the man trying to keep his dignity after being pushed out of his children's lives. You, the grandparent raising grandbabies, while the world judges, but never helps. You, the one who was called too emotional, too difficult, not good enough. Let me tell you this, as someone who's been all those things and more. You are not too much. You are not the problem. And you do not need to win anyone's permission to be proud of how far you've come. You only need one person to believe in you. Just one. And if that person is your child, that's more than enough. Because children know. They know who stays, who shows up when it's inconvenient, who listens when their hearts whisper instead of shout, who stands beside them, not above them. That's the legacy we get to leave, not money, not perfection, not spotless homes or holiday photos, but truth, presence, soft strength. I don't have a perfect ending to offer you. I still mess up. I still burn the toast. I still cry sometimes when I see an old birthday card with handwriting that no longer matches. But I have this. A home that's warm, kids who feel safe, and a story that didn't end in silence, but in a voice. One small voice that stood up and said, "She's not the villain you said she was." That was enough to change everything. So if you've ever been told you're not worthy of love, respect, or a seat at the table, pull up your own chair. Set your own place. And if you're still carrying shame that doesn't belong to you, let it go. It was never yours to begin with. If this story made you feel seen, I hope you'll share it with someone who needs it. Someone sitting in a courtroom alone. Someone staring at an empty dinner table. Someone trying their best in the dark, hoping the light still sees them. And if you've lived something like this, leave a comment. Let someone else feel a little less alone tonight. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're just on a different path, and maybe, just maybe, it leads somewhere better than you ever imagined. And hey, if you want more stories like this one, stories that remind us we still matter, feel free to subscribe. Not because you have to, but because somewhere out there, someone else is waiting to feel seen too.